Of course, I was reading a little bit on your website, and one thing kind of stand out to me. You said that you knew exactly you wanted to be an architect when you were a 6 year old. Can you recall like your earliest memory of that kind of feeling and that idea of what an architect should do and look like?
When I told my parents I wanted to be an architect, they were pretty surprised I knew what the word was or that I knew what architects did. But I had a family that were developers, and I think my earliest memory was being in my family lived in Spain in the Costa del Sol, and so everybody would be going to the beach, and I'd go to my uncle's office and stand in front of these little, these models of buildings with little people and trees and stuff on them, and I was completely fascinated with these models. So for me, like that I remember being very, very small. Now I have a 6 year old, and I can't imagine if he turned to me and said I want to be an architect and not like a baseball player or a surfer or something. You know what I mean? So, but I think it's not uncommon. I think if you're in a dinner with a bunch of architects, I think you might find a lot of people were actually drawn to it. And if they suffered through the entire education process, there's probably a reason why. Like they really felt like that was what their calling was. So I feel like for a lot of people in the business, that's really what they thought they were always going.
So when at what point, let's say you start, by the time you're a teenager, you already know that that's where you want to pursue, you want to go to school for. What were your early inspiration? You mentioned you had a family that was involved, was a developer, so you were very young, already exposed to, architecture and design overall. But anybody specifically, like a role model that kind of stand out, and you're like, yeah, I want to do that. That's what I'm interested in.
Not really. I mean, I didn't really, if I look back now, I could see creative kind of parts of my family, but I didn't grow up in a house that you would say, wow, this one was an artist and this one was a musician and this one, my dad called me l'artiste, right? Because we were a French family and he called me the artist, and it was kind of, that was me. I was that kid. We were five kids. So I think that it just was one of these things that, just stuck with me, like physical models as a kid with, like the blocks and the Legos and all that kind of stuff really was kind of like a driver. And by the time I think I was 13 years old, I had the opportunity. A friend of mine's family was redoing their basement to make a rec room and all that, and she said to me, "Why don't you design it?" Her name's Mrs. First, and she's a very important person in my formation. And she's like, "Why don't you design it?" And I, figured out how to make some drawings and talk to a builder, and say, "Well, what if the carpet were like this or like that?" Pretty cool. I actually think she has a picture of it, so I'm gonna track her down and find that. But it was the first time that I really got the opportunity to actually physically make something, right? Where I was sitting down with someone who was going to actually, take a wall out. What if we took this wall out here, and what if we, built it this way? So I think that was kind of a. It's funny you're asking me, and I'm thinking about it. I'm like, what were the inflection points that really stuck out? And when I was in high school, by the time I was in high school already, the only thing I ever talked about was architecture and wanting to be an architect. But when I was going into my senior year, someone was asking me, well, what do you want to do when you graduate high school? I said, I want to be an architect. And they said, oh, you must be really good at math. And math was the only thing I wasn't really good at in school, right? And so I started getting nervous about this idea that maybe I had it all wrong. Maybe architecture is just all about math. And I got lucky that in my classroom there were a bunch of posters for things for students to do. One of them was this summer program at Cornell University to study architecture. And so I went to that program, and I think that was a very important piece of me making a full head, strong decision that this is what I want to do. Right. So the summer before my senior year of high school, I spent that summer doing college courses in an architecture school at Cornell. And that really was like the first time I got exposed to what architecture school would be like, and really knew that that's for sure what I wanted to do.
Any big surprise, or perhaps in a good way or bad way, as soon as you started that program?
Well, I think that I think there was this ongoing kind of like realization that you were probably going to work way too much architects, even in the summer program, the architecture students were always working, and all the other people were doing all sorts of fun things and working. But architecture students were always in the studio, lights on all night. So this idea that you had to work a lot and all the time was really kind of like shocking at some level. But more than that, that people would always joke about how unhappy architects are, right? And so this is like something that we always saw, like, you're working in an architecture firm as a young person, and you just were like, well, architects are frustrated people. They're frustrated artists kind of thing that are trying their best to be creative, but are always forced back into a place where they're making compromises with their ideas. And that was super important to me because, I went to an architecture school where we went to school, then we went to work, then we went to school, then we went to work. It's a co-op program at the University of Waterloo. And so by the time I graduated architecture school, I had already worked for 3 years in architects' offices, some in Paris, some in Canada, different offices, maybe 5 or 6 different offices. And we joked that, I never worked for anybody who was happy, or I never worked for a happy architect. And that was like a big issue for me because I was like, now, because it was co-op, it was a 6-year program because you're going to work and school. So by the time you finish school, you got 3 years of work. There's no summers. The summers are work. You're like work, school, work, school, work, school. And then you're like, well, what's it going to be for me, right? What do I want to do? And the reason they weren't happy was because of three major things, right? They were, not being able to do the work that they want to do. That's obviously a common thing. I want to do this, but I'm forced to do that, right? Secondly, they're not getting paid enough, right? They never felt that they got paid enough for the effort and for the contribution to a development or a project, that they got paid so little and had to like figure out how to make money. And thirdly, that in doing what they're doing, they were unable to sort of like build a vision for themselves that was telling a story of who they wanted to be. I think that that's a big piece of it. It's kind of like you go through architecture school, you have all these big ideas, and you're forced to have rigor in thinking through big ideas. But once you actually get to practice, a lot of architects are forced to completely do something that wasn't at all what they intended to do. Right. And so I think that that's one of the things that really struck me. It was like, well, how am I going to do this?
Mm.
Now I'm graduating, and what do I want? Like, do I want, is that for me, the quality of life question was a very, very big piece of the puzzle. And it led me immediately to start to think about, well, if I do this, I'm going to have to figure out how to do this my way, right? How am I going to get control back? And how am I going to, figure out a way to make money? Like, I don't want to be like angry all the time, or frustrated all the time. And so, this idea of how do you get control of what you design, a lot of that has to do with just like being able to control the build part of it, right? If you're in control of the build, then you really have control of the design, because someone's not coming to you and value engineering and changing everything. This thing is too expensive. So I immediately, quite frankly, left school and started my own business doing design and construction, right? So I designed and built everything I drew. And I was thinking that along the way, hopefully, well, the other thing that that architects don't like is clients, right? Like they prefer not to have clients because the relationships can be difficult sometimes.
Yeah.
Although our best projects I can attribute to great clients every single time, right? That's a clear line from a great project to a great client. So I immediately started working and whatever work I could find, and just being like, we'll design it and we will build it. And I thought that in doing that, I could control the product and the outcome of the design because I was in control of the build part of it.
But that requires some sort of a clarity, right? Because as you finish your school, you're in your mid-20s, and then suddenly you already have an understanding what do you want to do, not only on the business, but a perspective of your own point of view, your creative input as well. And that sometimes takes time. That people has to work and for a long time before completely understand their ethos, their visibility, their sensibility. So for you, was after school, you already kind of had a sense, you had a game plan, or kind of more spontaneous than that?
Look, I think I was always somebody who was going to work for themselves. Like, it was just like, when I was in high school, I started businesses, and I was somebody who was driven. Running a business was important to me. it was part of like what was interesting about this for me, and that might have helped me become much more kind of like assertive into starting my own thing right away. Now remember, I had 3 years of experience because I was in a co-op school, so I'd
Mhm.
been in offices, I'd seen what offices are about. 4 months at a time, 8 months at a time. But yeah, I was very, very, very focused on this idea that I wanted to do my design. I was like the design end of the studio, right? Like in architecture school, there's different types of personalities, and I would always be in trying new things, experimenting with design, trying things I didn't know how to get completed. But I was just really interested in design ideas, and so I really wanted to be able to design. And if I wasn't going to be able to do that, then I wasn't going to do this job at all, because the whole technical side of it and my career shows that it's that like we push the whole technical side away, right? We are our studio is really very well versed on how things are built because we were a design build for many, many years. We built everything we designed. And so the understanding of how things are built became very, very important for us so that we can get the design ideas across. But in the end, we decided like we just want to focus on the design side, and we work with partners who execute and take our projects to the sort of technical rigor that they need to go into these giant projects we're working on now.
The idea of a frustrated artist, I think, is so true when talking to architects. And a lot of times you say an ability to create what they want. But would you agree with me that sometimes when there are limitations or parameters is where creativity really flourish when
For
you
sure,
have.
for sure. Well, let me say it like this. I think a project with no limitations is not a project at all, right? It's like it's if we said, oh, we don't want clients, we're going to come up and dream up ideas all day. We'd come into the studio and look at each other, and go, what should we do? Let's do something cool. Let's do something really, really cool, right? Like we would never get anywhere because, like you say, the fact that they're asking us to solve for some sort of set of problems is really the opportunity to put design thinking to come to an answer, to come to a solution, right? To find out what they're searching for. And one of the things that we've been very focused on is understanding what is the problem? What are we solving for, right? And we've been very focused on, a lot of studios have a prescribed point of view on what things should look like. And I think that's great. And I think, there are amazing architects who have this beautiful crafted work that's got a singular view, and they craft that over time and over years, and it just becomes so beautiful and so well defined. We were and are more cater to a client's desire. Like if you look across our portfolio, you go, I can't believe the same firm did this and this. Doesn't even make
Mhm.
sense to me, right? Like how is that possible? And for us, we're really looking at the opportunity to use design intelligence to solve what the client's problem is. And so for us, like the business part of it's a really big part of it. Like what are you trying to achieve? What is it that you want, and why are you calling on us? And so our work is so much in this kind of experiential realm that for us, what it looks like is part of the story, but it's not the architect's story, right? And that's always been important to me. It's like our job, our job is about shaping the world that people live in and shaping their emotions, shaping their outcomes, affecting things like delight and grief and joy and pain, right? Like all these things that are our everyday, the relationships we have with other people, right? The memories we have in the cities we live in. And so we're thinking across those kind of outcomes as our starting point. And from there, then we're like, okay, well, that's what we want to achieve. And we want to achieve that, like, for example, if it's cancer care, because we believe you'll have a better outcome as a cancer patient. If it's a nightclub, because we think you might learn something about yourself. What, like we're like, if it's an airport, because we think if you're less stressed, you'll have a better experience. So let's figure out how to get you less stressed. Like, so we're always like, let's solve for why this project needs to be done in a certain way. And then the way it looks is kind of like a layer, and it's a layer that is responsive to what the question of the emotive response is.
I'm interested about the subject of solving problems. I'm sure each project has a different level of problem to solve. But if you are to step back in a macro view, do you see a common denominator that problems that are happening or a problem solving issue that's happening throughout all your work and all your projects you've been working for the last few years?
When we started, all our projects were nightclubs, and I think that's not uncommon, by the way. I've met some other architects that are design architects, and I think design architects like things like nightclubs because they allow, someone comes to you and goes, "I want to do something really cool," right? And you're like, "Okay, great." And when they ask you to do the nightclub, they're expecting to come in and see something incredible, something new, something they haven't seen before. And so they're looking for you to do something new because they're looking for a wow factor or some sort of like emotional response when someone walks into a club. Very theatrical. And we would we would have very like lofty ideals about what that might be. So like, can we help people relinquish their inhibitions, right? Well, alcohol makes you relinquish your inhibitions, but could we do architecture that does that? And if you do that, why do we want to do that? We want to do that because we want someone to learn something about themselves, because we want them to be inspired. We want them to leave and be like, this is like, we were literally, it seems silly, but we were literally, well, if someone goes to a nightclub and they had such an incredible night and they're like, I never danced like that before, or I never danced on a table before, or whatever that might be, or, I got up on stage, or, I had this amazing set with a DJ, that you might learn something about yourself that you didn't otherwise know. And a nightclub is a place where you can actually open your heart up, or you can be a different part of your persona. And so we learned that we were trying to inspire people. We were trying to make an architecture or a design language that, whatever it was trying to inspire you through compression and expansion, whatever the idea is. When we went on to work in things like healthcare, we learned that we were still designing to inspire people. Now, we found out that people who are inspired have a better chance of making it through cancer care. So we were like, okay, let's make a building that's inspiring people. How do we do that? So there is this kind of theme that we see and learnings that we have, whether we're doing, a nightclub or a hotel or whatever it is, a city, a master plan of a town on the top of a mountain, a ski village, that we're trying to understand what is the opportunity to make experiences that people will remember, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that I think is really important is like we're thinking about like a calendar of time, right? How does that change? How does it change when it's Tuesday afternoon at 1 o'clock and Saturday night at 10 o'clock, right? And what does it mean to be in a place like we're doing a resort for a brand on a beach somewhere, that you can start to really think about where are people, what do we want people to do? We want people to do, let's just say something like have a coffee with a friend, go do yoga on the beach, come back to that beach at night. And what is that experience going to be like? And how are we able to configure those relationships so that we can create those compulsions and those kind of like those moments of spontaneity where this kind of like magic happens. And that has been like a very important piece of like why I think people call on us to sort of help understand the why of a project. Like, what's the experience going to be? And so traditionally architects would get like, okay, here's the piece of land, and like a planner or the architects themselves would, okay, how many rooms do you want? Where's the gym? Where's the food? Where's the this? Where's that? And then you'd come up and you go, here, it all fits. Look, it's beautiful. It's going to be nice. There's a main access, or it's a curvy road. And we don't do that. We don't start like that. We are like, what are all the experiences we want to happen? Okay. And then let's put a calendar. There's 4 seasons, or let's go from morning to night. And on that sort of experience map are all sorts of connections that we're looking, right? Where are you and I going to do this if we think this is part of the culture of that place where people are going to work and learn and whatnot? And so now we've got this map of experiences, and we can understand adjacencies. We can understand when we want things to happen. And so we're like, yeah, it's going to feel like that. You could write a story about it or make a movie about it before you actually built the physical thing. And then we're like, okay, now that we know the kinds of things we want to happen, now let's make a plan. And when we do it that way, we find that the adjacencies and the experience of like how things happen are completely different than the brain that says, I got to get this many square feet, this many, you know what I mean? You got to like, your brain's being very, it's coming from a very practical, I don't know if it's practical, but it's coming from like an organized thinking. You're thinking about things in a very clear way because you got to get all the program in. And that's the way we used to do. We'd get the program and then lay out a plan. And then we'd say, yeah, that plan works. And maybe sometime way down the future, like, we should put retail here, or this would be a good spot for a restaurant, or maybe we'll get a dry cleaner over here. And we're like, that's not, we're already deciding where all that happens before we draw the master plan.
Yeah, you gave so many great examples about finding inspiration, or kind of, as you mentioned earlier, like creating the magic of the space. But as an architect, do you have, is it a formula base? Is that 1, 2, 3 step? How do you go about to the process beyond just the conversation, the internal brainstorming with the team to actually executing those ideas?
Well, I think that firstly, the studio, I hope and I believe, is a very safe place where we really believe that the value of the people in the studio is ideas, right? And we are kind of a best idea wins kind of place, right? Like it's not where's Lionel and what does he think of this idea? It's like the ideas are coming from everywhere. They're coming from people who just started working here, and they're coming from design leaders, and so the idea generation piece of it, and to find a studio that continually can find new ideas, is about creating a world where there's trust, right, and there's a safety in your ability to fail, right? Like you hear this a lot, right? You could pin something up on the wall, and we have this kind of mantra like you could never get an A if you're afraid of getting an F. Like you have to if you really want something to be amazing, you've got to have the confidence that it might actually be terrible because you're taking enough risk, right? That you pin it up on the wall. It's not good. We move on. We have more ideas, and we challenge each other as a safety group, right? Like everyone feels comfortable to be told like that's not going to work or that's not good. So I think like inspiration comes from collaboration. I don't think any idea ever comes in the vacuum out of this studio, right? And then if the question's like referencing like where do you get ideas, we get them everywhere. Like I mean, for me personally, as a human being, as a thinker, they're coming from like every moment. You might just stop and take a picture of like we once did a picture. We once saw an ad in a magazine of a gold. It was like a gold perfume bottle on a black backdrop, and the way that the shadow of the gold hit the black was we were like, I was like, I want to do a project that just talks about how light reflects off of gold onto a matte black surface, right? And that just became the concept of the whole project, and so like the inspiration for idea that became this amazing kind of like indirect lighting that like filled the whole room. So the ideas can come from anywhere, and I think like the rigor of an idea is not necessarily where it came from. It could come from biology, it could come from a kid's movie, it could come from a book you read. It's probably a series of all those things that are coming together. But I think that at the end of the day, it's about the rigor and the ability to make it into something new, right, and reinventing it.
People usually hate it when I ask this question. It's almost like picking your favorite child. But do you have a favorite project? I mean, you've done so many, so it's such a diversified profile of projects. Do you have a couple that you hold dear to your heart?
Well, I would say that my favorite project is iCrave because it's just been like this ongoing project, and I'm very proud of what we've created here, and the amount of talent around me and watching people grow is a really big thing. But in terms of projects, I would say like that changes. I would say right now my favorite project is 53, which is a project at the new extension of the MoMA underneath the David Geffen wing. And that project was something that was very personal to me. It was during COVID. Well, we got a project that was basically at the MoMA, and we were like, well, I was like, I think I want to do this project. For me, it was like a long time since I just did a project. I have all these studios and studio leads, and I kind of act like an editor now. I kind of like create ideas, and people go off and I instigate people for an idea that bring it back to me. I'm like, well, what if you thought about this? Have you looked at this? And maybe we should do it like that, change the plan. But really, I'm letting people do their thing, right? And I realized it had been a long time since I was like, this is going to be my project. So it was like, it was important for me at the time to really just be, oh yeah, I remember why I do this. I'm not doing this because I want to run a company. I love actually the details and the design and actually thinking through a problem. And that project being adjacent to the MoMA was super. It was like, well, what's our expression today? What do we want to say if we're going to do a restaurant, in New York, at the MoMA, COVID, and the riots, and New York was like upside down,
Mm.
and it was like a risk to even think of a project in Midtown at the time. And so I think like it was really a special kind of intimacy that I had with the work, with the team, to actually get down to every detail on the project and think through it. And we did, and for us, that was like that project was really two things. How do we create a world? How do we create a restaurant that is a sculpture, right? You are actually in a sculpture when you're in the restaurant that has many different faces to it. It's got a lot of kind of like insides, outsides, looking from above, looking from below, very sculptural, very, very physical. And at the same time, build a room that like what I call a yummy room, which is like a completely separate concept, right? It's like make something really sculptural and modern and speaking to what we believe the spirit of today is at the MoMA. And I want it to be like this, like perfectly yummy room, which means the lighting and the sound quality and the intimacy of dining with friends. These are very different kind of like animals, and smashing them together. So we set a high bar, and I think we were able to come out with a nice outcome.
What it was like to you the first time you walked that project? It's completely done. You have the chance to see it as it's fully resolved. What was going through your head?
I was well. Firstly, I was super happy that the food was good. Because we didn't know it was a first restaurant. We were really nervous, and the food's incredible. So we love going there. We love taking people there. I was like, like the greatest joy of what we do is having an idea, putting it on paper, right? Working it out through modeling, and then going to build a big team of consultants and engineers and contractors and the client and the value engineering and all the parts, and then seeing it built, right? And then people are engaging in that project the way that you had envisioned way back at the beginning, right? When you had some ideas about what the thing could be. So I think like the arc of what we do is a great gift. It's this incredible gift to be able to drop something out of your brain and then see people use it, and it's like, oh yeah, that's what I thought, or oh my god, I didn't think that at all. But in this one, because the quality of the lighting was such a the quality of the sound and the lighting was such a big deal. Like it was such a big. Maybe I'm just getting old, right? So I'm like, don't want to be like in loud nightclubs anymore. But this quality of like cinematic, just taking your iPhone and like taking pictures around it, and it just felt like scenes in the movie, like it was lit. I really wanted to have like this kind of like central glow around the table, right, where you actually create a room, like your shoulders and head around a round table, create a room that's lit from the inside. And that's kind of like sitting around a fire, and then this kind of like really theatrical room around you. I was really, really, really happy. It was like I felt like it had sort of like put a marker in the ground for where we were at, where I certainly was at. You know what I mean, creatively. And when your company gets to a certain scale, your company is not you. Maybe some architects are just like, this is the way it's going to be forever. But mine certainly wasn't, because so many people were designing their own stuff. It wasn't my creative vision. And I felt like I got the opportunity, I took the opportunity to just go ahead and make it something that I had a vision for and play and put it down. So I feel really good about it. And it allowed me to start thinking about where I want to go from here. Like, where do I want my creative, how do I want to spend my creative time moving forward from this moment where I stepped back in on the ground level and drew something with my own hands. So that was very important, because I launched a new company just after that, right? We launched this new company called Journey. And I'm not sure I would have done it if I hadn't actually sat down and drawn that project, right? Like it sort of reaffirmed my faith in what I do and what I want to do.
Well, tell us a little bit about Journey.
So our work has always been like innovation and design. Like if you look at our projects, we're trying to find ways to like leverage technology, find the intersection of our physical and digital world, right? And start to really understand how that works. And so a lot of our projects looked at technology and integrated technology, and they could be simple technologies, but they could be profound, like all the iPads in the airports really changed the whole passenger experience, or putting RTLS technology on patients, which is a real-time location service in cancer hospitals, completely changed the kind of experience profile of what it meant to go into a hospital system, and so on and so on. So we started to see more and more of like our solutions for our work to include other disciplines that we actually didn't do in the studio, but that we actually always came up with when we were talking to our clients about what this is going to be. What's this going to be? And we'd show them design, but we'd also show them, and this digital layer, and this digital layer, and you can implement this. And finally, I was like, I don't think I could like really look my clients in the face with a straight face if I'm only showing them physical design, right? Like there's kind of like this piece where, I joke like you're the guy with the colored pencils, like, and you're like, well, what about all your clients are like, what about all that stuff I keep hearing about, right? Like, how's your, how do I use my phone to access the room in my hotel? And how can we use this technology, that technology? So for me, it was like, okay, well, what does it look like if we built a company today? Like, what would a company look like if we started it from the ground up today? Not like, hey, iCrave now does virtual design, or the iCrave now, does voice activated, Gen AI type stuff. And so I had a couple of co-founders, and we went out and we said, what does that look like? Like, what is the company of the future? Like, and for me, I think it was a little bit defensive, because we started to see, when Pinterest came out, we started to see like this impact, even if you were on a website with IKEA, like this is pre the big AI thing last year or the year before. You'd be like, look, you could just drop this couch in your house, take a picture of your room, drop the couch in. I mean, this is going to kill interior design, right? And most of our work is all interior stuff, right? Most of our stuff is doing interiors, and we were like, how do we get ahead of this thing, and how do we use this technology in our process so that we can continue to innovate on behalf of our clients? So we built a team, and we went out and we got some backing, financial backing, and we sort of built this new thing called Journey. And Journey really looks at the world from like this kind of like experiential, like offering. Like, what is the experience stack, right? Does it include physical design, digital design, virtual, right? Are we doing immersive, right? How do we use AI? So we put these teams together. We have an AI team, but a small group that does Gen AI and voice AI, right? We've got an incredible team that we brought into the fold from London called Squint Opera, doing all these amazing digital twins and also immersive design. And so, like, what we said to the team at iCrave was like, look, your material box has just opened dramatically, right? You have content, right? You have video screens, and we have immersive. You want to do some sort of immersive experience. We're using digital twinning, right? So we've got an AI team that's helping us solve solutions for experiential interventions with our clients. And so we're able now to like look at the design problem and have a whole series of solution sets that we didn't otherwise have. And I really think that it's important, and I think I'm not the only one thinking this way, but it's very, very important for the designers and architects to really be thinking about how, you leverage technology that's out there to change the process, to improve the process, and to deliver a package of deliverables that maybe doesn't look the way it used to look even 5 years ago or 2 years ago.
Yeah, and I'm curious to hear your opinion about something, because iGrave has the experience and the resources to come out with a project like this, and had, as you mentioned, be proactive and deal with those upcoming not problems but those changes head on. Any good suggestions for an upcoming student, someone who's just going to get out of school right now and now have to not only deal with, as you mentioned, long hours, all the frustration and all of those things that come along with the business, but also with AI, who's
Yeah, I think AI is going to eviscerate this business in a lot of ways, and what I mean by that is not that you won't have architects and designers anymore, but the old way of how things are done is going to change forever. And so we had a woman who had come here for an internship, and then she went back to Europe, and then she came back here, and we saw her, And I was like, "Oh, you're back." And we were at a dinner together, and she said, "Yeah." I was like, "I didn't know you were back in the studio." She's like, "Well, actually, I took another job." And I was kind of looking at people in our studio. I was like, "How come she's not working for us? Like, we love this girl. She's out with us tonight." And at some point, I was like, I just couldn't get over it. I was kind of like, "Well, where are you working?" And she told me the name of a place, and I just was like, "Wow, I cannot believe that!" Like, and I just couldn't believe it. I was kind of shocked, and maybe it was a little ego, but I was just surprised more than anything. And then we started talking. I said, "Look, it's cool. You work wherever you want, but I think," and I said to her this, and this is what I would tell young people. I said, "I think the most important thing for you to think about if you're going to go work somewhere and you're fresh out of school is how are they doing the business of architecture and design, right? What is their viewpoint on how this work gets done?" Because if you go to a firm, and this is a very important piece of like being a graduate today. If you're going to go to a firm that maybe has an amazing reputation, but is not at all in the mix of how things are changing, they're still doing it the way they've always done it, right? And that's where you're going to make your formative years. You might find yourself very soon having been trained in an area that no one's doing it that way anymore. And the next time you're going to want a job, right? Or you want to make sure that if someone says, do you know how to use this technology, or did you, and your answer is no, 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 that there's a whole group of people that are moving way, way, way past, that kind of like the way that we were trained in school. So I think it's important to like understand and be comfortable with it. And, maybe that's what you want. Maybe you don't want to be in a tech forward company or whatnot, but be very comfortable with understanding what it is, what's the viewpoint of that company on how they think about technology and how they implement technology into the process of what they do.
I think this is such a valuable advice, and people are going to walk away with a lot of great insight and information. But Lionel, before I let you go, there's three questions I usually ask everybody that comes by, and you will be no exception. I need you to recommend us a few things. A book to read. It can be your favorite book or something that you read recently. Something to watch, a movie, a TV show, your choice. And a guest. Who should we invite to be here next?
You should read The Little Prince. I'm sure even if you have read it, you haven't read it in a long time. You should read The Little Prince. It's an incredible book. You should watch. What should you watch? Let me think of something good. You should watch maybe a Cook, the Thief, His Wife, and Her Lover. That's a great, great movie.
Yeah.
I think there's this kind of like visual storytelling in that movie that's like layers a whole visual story on top of a narrative, and see how like these things can overlap each other. And then who should we invite to this podcast? Give me a second on that one. Anywhere in the world?
Anywhere in the world.
And it's an architect, designer, lighting.
Anyone that you think would be great, that you like to hear from, or get to know more.
I think you should invite Andrew Deichmann, who used to be the CEO of a company called Mother. I think he's a very interesting character, good friend, who can land a little bit of a solving design problems through marketing, thinking, understanding. He does a lot of development with very young entrepreneurs, 18, 19, 20-year-olds.
Wow.
Who are like they have a big idea, they don't know how to take that idea and turn it into a business. And I think that it would be very interesting to hear his point of view on that. As this kind of like a senior guy, and has done a lot of amazing things, and working with people. And I think today more than ever, young people have ideas, and they want to figure it out. And it's like getting it. Not necessarily going to do a Facebook, but you still have an idea, and you've got a way to bring it out. So I think that would be a very interesting person to talk to. I think you should talk to Andrew.
I love that, because even though we live in a world that you can find everything you want online, something about mentorship and have someone who has gone through, it's a different level. You can't Google that, right? So definitely.
You can't Google that. There's like so much. There's still way too many kids who come out of school. It's just a different generation they see people who just made it rich, or like something big happened, a big, huge new startup that took off and became a billionaire. And it's like, for most people, it's still just about hard work, right? It's still just about, and like really putting your head down, focusing on something, and really pushing hard on an idea. And I really believe that good design doesn't happen in a vacuum. Like I said earlier, like you have a good project, you for sure have a good client, right? There's no, I bet you anybody would agree with that, you know? And all the different people that you have to intersect with to get to the end of a project and it's still a good project, like learning and understanding, like you're just one voice, right? Amongst so many different people. You might lead those people, which is another skill, but that's like you've got to understand that there's a lot of people who are inputting into the thing.
I know, what a wonderful conversation. I want to thank you so much for taking the time. I personally walking away here with a lot of exciting things to think about, to explore a little bit further, a couple concepts and ideas that I think I want to, uh, even ask next future guests to hear their opinion as well, and then we can mix those things together. But I want to thank you for taking the time and joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It's great talking to you.